Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Wednesdays with Wayne. I'm Wayne Frederick, your host. Thank you for taking time out of your, what I'm sure is a very busy day with the way the marketplace continues to have actually a pretty good level of speed to it. We've seen a little bit of a leveling out, I guess, in the process. Still massive inventory shortages. Interest rates are on the rise. All those things that had been predicted that were maybe perhaps upset the apple cart, they're all now happening. And as a result, so when we see interest rates start to rise, we see buyers come back into the marketplace. That's happened, but they still have a real challenge with inventory. I think that as we head into the traditional selling season, you're going to start to see more and more inventory numbers come up. Saw a very interesting stat or series of stats within the last couple of weeks from Keeping Current Matters, and I know I've talked to you guys about that before if you've been on a series of, this is not your first rodeo with me, but it was a very interesting graph of inventory levels and nationwide. I mean, inventory is down about 28%. But what was interesting to me in that was that the one state where inventory levels had increased was Idaho. And what I found interesting about that was if you looked at that same chart from the year before, Idaho was one of the states that had the highest percentage of increase in pricing. And I've made this comment before that I felt like people were sitting around trying to time the market a little bit, that there were a lot of sellers sitting on the sidelines. There was a stat that I learned last summer that about 70% of homeowners were at that point contemplating a sale. And I felt like they were trying to time the market, right? Well, when I saw the numbers for Idaho, I'm like, okay, they were trying to time the market. And because there was such appreciation, all of a sudden they saw a lot of people dump their way into the marketplace. And so that was one of the things that we saw happen in that scenario. So thank you for taking the time out of your day. This is part 2 of a 4-part session this year on the Ultimate Listing Presentation. We're going to dig deeply into pricing today. Now, session 1 of 2 weeks ago, we got into that opening dialogue, right? How do you set the stage for a great listing presentation? What are those key questions that you ask? And again, I will just lay out that the most important part of the beginning of this presentation, the questions that I gave you last time, is the fact that we do need to know what's going on in a seller's mind. We need to know the framework, if you will, the filter within which they're going to look at all of your comments. And it will be based in large part on their past experiences of selling homes. All right, so that's the importance of that. So if you remember, we asked those questions, right? Have you ever sold a home before? Good experience or bad? Tell me about each one. The next question was, do you think this time selling your house is going to be easy or hard? Do you think there's a lot of negotiation that goes on when you sell your home? Then we, how long do you think it should take to sell your home this time? Then what's the most important thing to you in the transaction? What's the next most important thing? What's that third thing we could add to knock it out of the park? Then we went into expectations, right? What do you expect from me as your realtor if you hire me? What could I expect from you as a seller? How do I win with you? What's the one thing I better make sure I always do? How do I lose with you? What's one thing I better make sure I never do? How do you prefer to communicate? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how honest do you want me to be with you? And then once you get all of those questions down, then at the very end of the last session, I said, hey, here's a list that I go through with everybody. Here's what I think you can expect from me. And here's what I think I have the right to expect from all of my sellers. And I go through this with everybody. It always matches up. I would love to list your property. So now let's talk pricing. All right. So that's like the beginning of the listing presentation in like what, a minute and a half, something like that. Okay. Those are the questions. You have all the dialogue. Don't be afraid. One comment I want to make before we get into pricing. Don't think you have to have them all memorized. It's not sexier for you to have them memorized. Take the questions in with you. Use your pen and write down their answers. Okay, make this part of your process. I promise you, your listing life will change if you make those opening set of questions part of your listing process. All right. Let me see if I can get my computer to work right here, and then we'll be on our way. Oops. Okay. So one of the things that I just want to touch on, it's not all of my immutable laws of real estate, but there is a way that a real estate market works. There's certain things that we're never going to change in a real estate market. And I just want to lay out a few of those as they relate to listings. So law number one is what I call the law of emotions. And it simply says this, is that buyers start the process very, very pragmatically. Then they ultimately buy from emotions. And I'll show you in a little while how that plays out. Sellers start out very emotionally and they become pragmatic. All right. So when a buyer starts the process and they reach out to you as an agent, or they start looking on one of the online portals or whatever, it's like, I want to live in this part of town, this geographic part of town. I need this many bedrooms, this many bedrooms, this garage, whatever. What do you got? No emotional attachment to any one of those houses. I'm going to look at a series of properties in a part of town. Then they get into a house and they're like, this is the one. And now it's all about emotions. They start placing furniture. They start thinking about their kids playing in the backyard, whatever. But that's not how they start the process. Sellers start out very emotionally. This is not a house. To the buyer, what houses do we have to look at today? To the seller, this is my home. And a lot of their decisions are based on emotions, okay? Especially in that listing presentation, the seller understand they're going to be operating from an emotional standpoint as a general rule. Over time, they become pragmatic, and that's when the seller's like, just get rid of it, right? I've already bought another house, I've moved, whatever. Just get me my money out and move on. But they don't start that way. All right. Number two is baselines. Buyers draw a baseline of physical features, and they won't go below it. This is key when you start running a market analysis on a piece of property. If I need 3 bedrooms and I need 2 bathrooms, I'm going to buy from the inventory of 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses in the geographic area I want to live. All right. There's a reason I need 3 bedrooms. So where this plays out is when we are doing CMAs, we want to make sure that we really have a very tight type of property, as tight as we possibly can, okay, so that we're comparing like to like. So as a general rule, buyers would take a substandard condition house with the physical features that they require, as opposed to one that didn't have the physical features that they required, but was in better condition. Thirdly, most buyers honestly don't care what the final sales price of the home is they purchase, because we live in a payment-driven economy today. This is just all about the house payment. Now we've seen some moves in the last, I would say, year, where we've had this cottage industry pop up of these third parties who will take your FHA, your VA, your 95% loan to value buyer, and they'll turn them into a cash buyer. All right. But even in that scenario, there's going to be financing on the back end. Buyers really don't care what the sales price is. They only care about monthly payment and what their down payment is, because it's completely a payment-driven economy. I mean, if you don't think so, you go buy an airline ticket and watch what pops up on the screen that you can finance your airline ticket. You can finance virtually everything on Amazon, because so much of what the American economy now is driven by payments. It's not a good thing, in my opinion, but my opinion doesn't really matter. It's where we are. So because of that, once the buyer's emotions kick in, as long as they can qualify for the payment, that's all that really matters. Law number 4 is ratio. Because buyers don't care what the final sales price is, year over year over year, you can go back as far as you want to, properties bring between 96 and 98% of listed price. Even if you looked, this is a very interesting thing, even if you looked back in 2008 and 9, the bottom of the market, the absolute trough, properties that sold, we're still selling for 96 to 98% of listed price. The latest number I heard was The 2020 number, nationally, property brought 99% of listed price. I am very excited to see what comes out of 2021. We may actually see that the average property sold for more than listed price. Now, that would lead us to believe, hey, pricing doesn't matter. And that was actually what we started seeing happen mid-year to the third quarter to the beginning of fourth quarter last year. All of a sudden, people say, well, Wayne, I'm seeing price reductions. That must mean that the marketplace is slowing down. And my comment was, or it means people quit making listing presentations, quit trying to figure out what anything was worth, and actually just walked into the seller and said, well, what do you think it's worth? And the seller would say, well, I think it's worth X. And the agent would say, well, you know what, let's just try that because I can't tell you it won't bring that. We're coming off of that now. We're not completely off of it, depending on price ranges. But there was a point last year where in every price range, it's like, get it on the market. There's no inventory. Law number 5 is time. This one doesn't change. This never moves. Time is not a seller's friend. A lot of that is because y'all deal with brand new inventory, not old inventory, okay? So no matter how hot a market is, one of the concepts that we have to make sure our sellers understand is that time is not their ally. The longer you are on the market, I will guarantee you statistically, you will get less money. Now, the challenge we have is sellers will always say, you know what, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry here. And what we have to be able to do is show them in our listing presentation, specifically the pricing section, why even though they're not in a hurry, speed is to their advantage. Law number 6 is expectations. The condition of a home needs to be at the market. Buyers will not pay extra money for features they do not expect to see. Now, the features that people expect to see fluctuate with the price ranges of property. We know this. But you're not going to get more money for your house because you put things in there that you wanted that people didn't expect to see. Let's say you're a gourmet cook, all right? And you decide you need to have a, $7,000 or whatever Viking range. But your house is like $150,000 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1-car garage house. Are you going to get $7,000 back for that Viking? No, you're not. Okay. So we always need to be, as we're walking through the house, if you remember step 1, we walk through, we have the seller tell us everything that they feel like are massive things that bring value to the table. I always told you, don't comment on it, just write it down, okay? Because buyers won't pay extra money for features they do not expect to see. And the reason that I'm such a fan of a 2-step listing process is because you need to think about role play, practice the dialogue of being able to tell a seller that that feature that they think is worth so much money actually isn't worth that much in the marketplace. All right. And that's both sometimes on the positive side of things, if they've over improved, it's also on the negative side of things. I mean, let's say that you go into a house and it smells like cat urine. It's always kind of my go-to story, or dog urine. Well, you can't, it's really hard for you to just look at a seller and go, your house stinks. So you have to develop a dialogue about the odor of the house. Smokers is another time that we have to learn how to do this. And so you have to have dialogue that delivers the message, but doesn't come off as too short, too rude, whatever. So you have to practice those things. That's why I believe that a 2-step listing process is just crucial. And then we have law number 7, which is the law of the bracket. If you'll run numbers for your own MLS, you will see that the bracketing thing does hold true. Now, granted, there's very few markets anymore that have a house under $100,000, but if they did, it would be $5,000 brackets. Properties tend to trade in $10,000 brackets between 100 and 200. $25,000 brackets 2 to 3, and over 3 we start jumping up in $50,000 brackets. Contention would be over $1 million. You probably start doing them at $100,000 chunks. There are marketplaces where that is a hard and fast rule. The marketplace that we're in right now, that is not a hard and fast rule for us right now. All right. So in a normal-ish market or a a marketplace where we have larger inventory numbers, we might draw a really hard line. Look, you've got to be 224.9. I would not make that comment today. I was just talking to somebody about this on Monday, because the inventory numbers are still so low, we could still probably push the upper boundary, right? I mean, again, you need to price properties based still today, is the marketplace that we are currently in. Now, if this thing flips, we'll probably do this again later on in the year, and I'm going to go, all right, here's the new dialogue. But for the marketplace that we're in right now, I want you to give just as much weight to competition as you do historical sales, okay? Right now, in my mind, it's about a 50-50. Last summer, you gave probably 65-35 weight to the competition, not to what had sold. All right. I think right now we're at about 50-50. In a market where you start seeing more inventory, it'll swing to 90-10, 80-20 historical sales versus active competition. This is the fluidity of the marketplace. Law number 8 is what I call cream, and it just says cream rises. If we can get our seller to buy into the fact that time is not their ally, given that market time is long. And what I mean by cream rises, people would say, over the years, people have said, you know, it's the craziest thing. I had this listing and nobody wanted it. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted it. Isn't that weird? Well, that wasn't weird to me at all. It just meant that everything that was better than that property, either in the physical features that it had or the condition, sold. And all of a sudden, the cream rose to the top, right? And if we couple that with the fact that we know that the faster a seller sells their house, the more money they're going to get, then the dialogue can then turn into, look, buyers are going to buy the best house they can find for the amount of money they can spend. We either are the best house or we're not. You get more money the faster you sell it. Why don't we just start as the cream of the crop when we go to the marketplace? Law number 9 is who is helping who. It simply says this: selling homes is all about competition. That's because the buyer starts the process pragmatically. So every time we introduce a property to the market, here's what's going on. Either the marketplace is going to help you sell your listing, help your seller get where they want to go, or you're going to help somebody else sell theirs. To me, it is absolutely that black and white. When we introduce a new property to the market, we are either a better house for the same money as what is already out there, or we are helping somebody else sell their house. Law number 10 is 3 levels. If there's anything that I want to implore you to put in your listing presentation, this is it. Every property that sells goes through 3 levels every single time. All we're really playing with is how long does it take to go through the 3 levels, knowing that the faster we go through the levels, the more control your seller has. First level is agent excitement. One of the things we need to understand, the sellers need to understand, is this: you're never going to get all the agents in the market excited about your house. We're going to get the agents excited about the house that have a buyer for that property. Those are the only people that we're going to get. All right? That's the first part of the equation. Hang on a second. I got to make a little switch here. All right. The next part of the equation, because the agents are excited about the property, they start to bring their buyers in great numbers. See, if we don't get the agents excited, they won't turn around and call their buyers. We do this in the hallway. When somebody may say, hey, I got to go out today and show X, Y, and Z, and another agent will go, oh, I showed that last week. That one is really bad, right? It's overpriced. It doesn't smoke. I just mark it off your list if I were you. And that will lead us to not getting buyers in great numbers. But if the agents think the value's, they're going to call the buyer. And then the point we have to get to, the point that every house gets to, is that when we check back for feedback, we're always one of the top 2 or 3 houses. And here's why. What one buyer likes, they all like. What one buyer dislikes, they all dislike. They're all looking at the same houses. There is a group of people out there right now waiting for new properties to be introduced to the marketplace. They've seen everything else. We all know buyers have missed out on, good gosh, no telling how many, and they're all ready for that new one to hit. But if when we price a property, we hit the market, and I'm starting to see this just where I live in Southwest Missouri, houses that are around my house that are sitting, right? They're sitting, and the marketplace is doing a little bit of a correction right now. Buyers are like, it's not that great a house for the money that last summer they would have paid it. Now we're starting to see a little more normalcy. We're not there yet, but a little more normalcy because they're all looking at the same houses. So here's what we need to make sure we explain to sellers. And we'll get deeply into this in the next session when I go through the value proposition and the things that you do. But if we put your house on the market and we don't get the agents excited about it, we have a problem because we'll see no showings. If we get the agents excited and we see showings, but the buyers don't come back for a second visit or aren't starting to make, in the marketplace we've been in, aren't starting to make offers immediately, we still have a problem. All right. So, a lot of times you would hear sellers say, well, we had a lot of traffic. You had a problem when you had traffic and no one tried to buy your house. You have a problem. You're getting the best buyers are always the first buyers. We say that to people constantly. We need to be able to explain why that is. There's a pool of buyers out there for every geographic location in your city waiting for new properties to come up. They're the first people that come through. That's how we create bidding wars. All these things that we've had go on. We need to be preparing our sellers, though, that market seems to have sunset to a degree. The market's still really strong. I'm not trying to be Mr. Gloom and Doom here, but pricing of property is coming back to the fore very, very quickly. Law number 11 is control. Real estate's all about control. One party always has more control over the other. It's never a level playing field. And by the way, if I hire you as my agent, you should have strategies to put me in control of the transaction because somebody's going to have control. For sellers, once again, obviously there's a point I'm trying to drive home here. For sellers, their control is in the very beginning of the process. The longer they're on the market, the less control they have. The more times people drive by a house, we all do this, the more times people drive by a house and it's still sitting, they go, I wonder what's wrong with that one. I wonder what's wrong with that one. And all of a sudden now they don't want to look at it. And then over time, it's sat there so long, you get the bottom feeders that come in and say, give me a good enough deal, I'll buy it. So if sellers want to get maximum money for their property, they'll do it very, very quickly. How does a seller gain control? Number one, by how long they're on the market. Number two, by the price of their property, making sure that the proper group of buyers is coming through. Number three, by how easy it is to get into. That's a realtor thing. Number four, by the condition. And number five, by the terms. How do buyers get in control? By how long the house is on the market, meaning if it's a long market time, the control shifts over to the buyer. Just the marketplace shifts that control to the buyer. And then the condition of the property is a control lever. Notice I don't believe that price is a control lever for a buyer because it's just not the best house I can find for the price. I'm cool with the price because it's in my budget. It's just not the best one I can find. Right? So if a seller has 5 control levers and a buyer only has 2, who has control of most real estate transactions? Sellers. And if as an agent, you want to control your time and your life as a realtor, sellers have more ways of getting in control. Therefore, if you deal with more sellers, you'll have more control over your life. And we've seen this play out, right? Being a buyer's agent for the last year has probably been the most stressful it's ever been in this industry. And in fact, the marketplace got to such an overheated deal, it was just stressful for everybody. Year over year, controlling the listing side of the equation is key. So the order of things, last week or 2 weeks ago, we went through the very big part. We're just going to cover today the CMA, nothing else. I just wanted to give you some background, some things that you might be able to explain to your seller. And when we open up for questions, if you want me to dig deeper into one of those laws that I laid out, more than happy to. So the truth is this. Every time we sit down and talk to someone about the value of their house, somebody's going to be very passionate about what it's worth. And the problem is, most of the time, it's the seller, it's not the agent. The agent just wants another listing because listings are a leverage point for agents. You get organic growth in your business by just having listings. And what I want to propose to you today is that it's important that you be just as passionate about its value as the seller is, so that you can have a high-level conversation with the seller about why it's worth what it's worth. Remember, the seller only has to defend their price with emotion, right? This is their home. They don't have to be logical, but you have to create a scenario where you bring logic to the table. You have to be prepared to defend your pricing strategy logically and from every possible angle. Now, I'm going to show you a very specific pricing theory and strategy that we know works. But I want to lay this out for you. If you choose not to go down the path that I'm going to lay out, that's fine. All I want to tell you is this. Whatever your pricing strategy is, you have to believe wholeheartedly that that's the way you value property. I'm going to lay out one that I know works for people, right? I know people that have been able to scale their business simply by using this pricing strategy because it was different than the other agents they talked to. I will say this up front. If your pricing strategy is price per square foot, it's totally illogical to price property strictly on price per square foot unless you're dealing with subdivisions that is nothing but the same floor plan over and over and over and over and over again with options. Okay? But if you're dealing with, any other kind of house other than tract housing, price per square foot is the worst way to price property. It's the easiest because it's a simple mathematical equation. It's what's taught the most because it's the easiest, but in a competitive environment, if you're going up against somebody doing price per square foot and you lay out the theory or the strategy that I'm going to give you today, you'll win every time. And you'll have sellers going, nobody's explained this to me before like this. Nobody's looked at the process this way. I have multiple clients that call me and tell me this. So we're going to get into that. So here's the basic theory. Because buyers approach the process pragmatically at the first level, every house is average. The features of a house don't kick in until after the buyer is already in it. Number two, extras only matter at the second level. What is the second level? The second level is the visit. Your CMA should represent a very specific type of property, huge price range, giving the seller every opportunity for top dollar. Number four, if the sellers understood, and I've always felt this way, if sellers knew how a buyer really went through the process, they'd always price their price properly, or their property properly. There's a disconnect between the way buyers work their way through the market because they start out pragmatically, and the way a seller looks at it because they're all emotional. But if we start pricing in harmony with the buyer process, then sellers go, oh, I see how that works. Number five, your pricing model and conversation should bring out the reality of pricing, meaning it's a payment-driven economy. There's not very much negotiation that's ever going to go on. And while price is presented in a tabular format, you should always have all of the supporting detail sheets. You should be armed with everything that you need so that you can have a high-level, in-depth conversation about any piece of property that you show on your CMA. All right, this is the most important part of the presentation to me. Now, we've covered everything. We've covered the seller's past experiences. We've covered what they expect from me as an agent, what I can expect from them. We've covered the top three things that they need to have happen in this. So they say it's a fabulous conversation. So anytime anything comes up, you want to always refer back to the top three issues. So let's say, it's important that I get my price, it's important the timing, and then that third one is kind of a wild card. Key numbers and correlations, and I'm going to show you how to pull out of the market analysis. Number one is listing price to sales price ratio and percentage. You'll see in just a second. I want you to bring that up every single time, because what a lot of sellers say is, when I've got to build cushion in for negotiation, I can always come down, but I can't go up. And we have to show them statistically the numbers. Number two, average days on market. Always show in your CMA the average days on market it's taking to sell a house just like theirs. Number 3, numbers of bedrooms, bathrooms, etc., right? The physical feature baseline. That moves a bit with markets, right? I mean, I know the physical feature baselines for the market that I live in, right? It hasn't moved in the 35 years I've been doing this, quite honestly. But it's a different driver in different markets, okay? You need to understand the drivers of your marketplace. Number 4, we're going to show them the houses they're competing against. We're going to show them the average prices of everything that is sold, everything that is currently on the market, and everything that didn't sell. That would be expireds, withdrawals, fall off the markets, whatever. You got to show them a snapshot of everything that's out there. If there's any disagreements on price, go back over the numbers in the context of the seller's needs from the top 3 issues until you either have an agreement or you decide you're not going to. By the way, this is why, and it's a question that people sometimes have a hard time pulling the trigger on. But the very last question of the first section of this was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how honest do you want me to be with you? If you remember that, be sure and ask that question, because if you have a disagreement on price, that's when you're going to be able to refer back to that question and say, wait a minute, you asked me to be a 10 on honesty. I'm just being honest with you. I can make something up right now and be what you want to hear, but you told me you wanted to be honest. So don't shoot the messenger that your house is not worth this astronomical number that you thought it was, right? That's why that question is so important. So here's exactly the dialogue that I'll suggest you use. Right now, we've already gone through the first section, if you remember, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's talk about the value of your home. Now, anytime we look at the value of a home, there's parameters within which people are going to buy houses. What do I mean by that? There's certain things they're looking for. The reality is they're looking for the same things you were looking for when you bought this house. That was why I asked you those questions earlier, right? What made you buy this house? Remember the very first dialogue when you go in the door, walk me through the house. Tell me what you feel like are the selling features of the house. Tell me why you bought this house over the other ones that you looked at. Because the next people that buy it, they're going to be looking for the same stuff. So here's the parameters that I used. Show them exactly what you put in your computer system. Show them all the search criteria that you plugged in to establish the value for the house. This is a big item, all right? So as an example, all the houses I'm about to show you are all 3 bedrooms like yours is. You have 2 bathrooms. All of the houses I'm about to show you have at least 2 or perhaps 2.5 baths. They all have a 2-car garage. A driver for my marketplace is whether a house is brick or not. So everything I'm about to show you is all brick. They're all on a residential lot like yours is. Now, obviously, if you have a house sitting on 3 acres, then the lot size is going to say, 1 to 5 acres, something like that. According to tax records, refer back to the tax records, the square footage of your house is 2,250. So all of the houses I'm about to show you are between 2,000 and 2,500 square feet. Now, I ran it intentionally a very broad price range, $200,000 to $300,000. Your house, according to tax records, is 17 years old. So everything I'm about to show you is 10 to 20 years old. And they're all in this particular part of town. And if you live where I live, there's a high school called Glendale. Now, what we learned about our marketplace, and again, this is one of those local drivers, a lot of people's decisions on where they moved was which high school it was at, okay? We used to believe, there used to be a theory, age-old real estate theory actually, that people put their houses on the markets in the spring so they could move during the summer so the kids could be settled in before they started the new school. Society's moved in that regard, I think, and I've been saying this for a long time. I think we're really seeing it now. Once your kids get in school, if you're not being transferred out of a town, that school system, that particular schools, tends to be a huge qualifier for you. In other words, I think a lot of us think that our kids are facing enough things without us yanking them out and taking them across town and throwing them down at a new school. So it just, and again, you have to figure out what the drivers are for your own market. All right. And the question we would ask is, would you agree that these are houses like yours? In other words, would you agree that your house would fit within these criteria? They're going to say yes every time. I'll just tell you, they're going to say yes. If they say no, then we're on the wrong page, and we got to back up and start over again. But they're going to say yes, but they're going to say yes with this caveat. Well, yes, but we have X, Y, or Z. We have great landscaping. We have better landscaping, Wayne, than everybody else has. Or, yeah, but we have the screened-in porch, or we have the glassed-in porch, or yes, but we just put all new appliances in, okay? All I want them to agree to is the basic baseline, because that's how buyers start the process. Let's talk about presenting price. The order of how you do this is massive, all right? We want to show them the sold properties first. Those were properties that were successful in the sale. Then we're going to show them the under contracts. That gives us a broader snapshot of the volume of properties that are trading hands, although we don't know what they sold for yet. Then we want to show them houses that attempted to sell but didn't get it done. That's expired and withdrawn. Then we want to show them the active houses that are currently on the market, the competition, if you will, and then we're going to summarize everything. And then after you do the summary, be quiet. Don't throw a price out there and then go, but if that's not what you were thinking, maybe we could bump it to this. No, going into these presentations, you know what price you're going to recommend, and your numbers will back it up. Simply present your price and be quiet. Sit on your hands, do whatever you have to. It says on there, grab your chin. That was my deal. I would present the price, and literally I would grab my chin. And it made the presentation look like I was really, really contemplating your next move. What I was really doing was holding my chin to remind myself to just not say anything. Let the seller process the information you've given them and see where they come from. And then the age-old negotiation thing, he who speaks first loses. All right. Tabular format, very simple to understand, gives a seller fantastic context. You will receive from us Excel spreadsheets that look exactly like this, that as you enter the numbers, some of these things will already be calculated for you, all right? So if you choose to use this format, we're going to give you the Excel spreadsheet. That's all this is, a very simple Excel spreadsheet, okay? We want to show them that these are properties that have closed, all right? They're properties that have closed. We got Justin Clifton raising his hand. Does that mean we have a question from Justin?
Justin, I will go ahead and allow you to talk if you have a question, unless this was an accident.
Justin, do you have a question?
Wayne, you can continue on. I'll message Justin and see.
Okay, yeah, hook back up with Justin. Okay, so we want to show them these are properties that have sold and closed. All right, so original price that people were asking. Asking price simply means the asking price when the property actually went under contract. Selling price is obviously what it sold for. Again, these are historical sales. AP, all right, that's asking price to sales price percentage. You need to show that for every property. The DOM is days on market. That's how long it took us to acquire a contract. There's the date that they closed, the month and year, the numbers of bedrooms, baths, and garages. All right. So what I would say to the seller is, so let's just take a look using the parameters that I just laid out for you. We've had 7 properties that have sold. All right. And then you're going to say, since this says 20, I mean, we could do, obviously that would be, I need to update this. My apologies. I didn't catch that. But in this much time frame, here's how many have sold. We've had 7 sales. All right. On the low end, right? Now you got to remember, I ran it from 2 to 300,000. On the low end, the house on Homeward brought 223. The most anyone has paid is 242. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things that I want you to notice coming out of this. All right. So that's original price, asking price, and selling price. We're going to deal with these two columns in the middle, right? The asking price when it actually went under contract and what it actually sold for. Days on market and percentage of list to sales price ratio. And we want to roll it back down here. So I would say on the low end, 223. The most anyone is paid is 240.25. The average days on market is 46, and the average list to sales price ratio is 99%. Now, the average days on market is 46. On the low end, we had a house on Meadow that and I want you to notice that it brought more, than full price. All right. We also had the house on Catalina that also sold for full price, but it took 100. What we can pretty well be rest assured is that they started at 249.9. They then dropped it to 239.9, and it sold immediately when it got into that little lower bit of a bracket. All right. But the average days on market number is crucial if you've asked the first set of questions, which are what's the most important thing to you, what's the second most, and I will tell you that will almost always be time and money. And if someone said it's important to me that I get the house sold within, I want to make sure this doesn't take more than, let's say, 60 days, right? That's what they've already told you. So what we would say is, you said earlier that you want to make sure this happened in 60 days. Well, the average is 46 days. In fact, there's only 2 houses that took longer, basically, than 60 days. So I think we can hit that 60-day window that you laid out. In other words, what we're trying to do is show them that the marketplace will validate some of the things that they wanted to see happen. All right? This is part of the story. This is a piece of the puzzle. Then
Wayne,
we also want to show them. Yes.
Oh, we've got a question. How far back do you typically go for your sold comps? The last 90 days, month?
I would try to keep it. I'd start at 90 days. And in the marketplace that we've been in, that's probably as far back as you'll have to go. Okay. After 90 days, I'm going to go 6 months. If you get suburban type properties, you may have to go back a year. All right. And it just changes the dialogue a little bit. It's like, look, there's not that many sales that have gone on. And I know you said earlier, back to frame it within their time frame, you said earlier that you want, and this will actually happen to you a lot on suburban properties or properties with acreage. People may say, well, look, I want to be out of here in 45 days. And when you run the CMA this way, you may find out that nothing ever sells in 45 days because there's not that many sales. There's like 3 sales in the last, there's been times there's been 3 sales in the last year. And they all took, the average was 120 days. And at that point you would look, let me go back for a second. At that point you look at the seller and say, hey, I know you said you wanted to sell this in 60 days. Nobody sold it in less than 120. Are you okay with that? And I got to, now that question's come up, I want to tell you a very quick story. I had a gentleman call me one time, and it was a suburban property, and I went out and talked to him. And as I pulled in, some of you don't, I had a radio show for 14 years in my market when I was selling, so I got a lot of business off the radio. And this gentleman had listened to me on the radio. He had his house listed with someone else, a great agent. And I pull up, and the other agent signs in the yard. And I said, wow, he's really good. Why am I here? And he said, I'll tell you why you're here. He told me that his average house sold in 45 days. I've been on the market almost 6 months and it's not sold. And I think I have an above average house. That's why you're here. I learned the lesson that day. Be very careful what you lay out and what you tell sellers. Okay. Because this guy's like, I got an above average house. Your average sells in 45 days. Mine's not going to take any longer than 45 days. I go back and run the CMA for this gentleman using exactly this format. And I went back out and I said, well, I got good news and bad news. I said, the bad news is there's been 3 houses that have sold while you've been on the market. But doing a little more research, here's what I discovered. They all had 10 acres. You only have 3 acres. So it appears that people were willing, they would take more. When I talked about baselines earlier, people draw a baseline of what they must have, but they will take other things over and above that, right? They'll buy a 4-bedroom house if they only needed 3, but a 4-bedroom buyer will never go back down and buy 3. If I wanted 3 acres, but I can find something with 5, I'll take 5 acres. Well, in this case, all these people had gone and taken 10 acres. I said, that's the bad news. Here's the good news. They're all sold. You're the only game in town. And I said, so we don't need to adjust your pricing at all. It's just I said, are you okay with that? And he goes, yeah, now that somebody's told me that. See, we make this comment earlier in the earlier session that relationships always just break down over one thing, and it's a lack of checking off on expectations. So if you don't do that expectation dialogue, which that was the first section, you're kind of guessing as to what the seller's thinking, right? So cover the expectation dialogue. This guy lost his listing strictly because he made the comment, my average listing sells in 45 days. I listed it. I got lucky. A guy drove by the next day and bought it. It's crazy, right? I just got lucky. If the other agent hadn't said my average listing sells in 45 days, if the other agent would have changed his presentation to say, look, a house like yours on average takes 120 days to sell. Are you okay with that? Seller would have still been happy. I never would have gotten the phone call. Other agent would have made the amount of money that I made on the deal. All right. So be very conscious of what you're saying in the listing presentation. By the way, I will tell all of you this. If you've never done it before, and if your state law allows it, record yourself in a listing presentation. And then go off by yourself and listen to it. And see what things that you don't realize you're saying that are coming out of your mouth. It's a tremendous learning experience. State laws are different. The state that I live in, which is Missouri, is I forget what they call it, but if you're party to a conversation, you can record the conversation and not have to tell the other person. Okay, onward. The next thing I'm going to show you is properties that are under contract. We don't know what these sold for yet, but there's 3 additional properties that have gone under contract. And here's the asking price and the original price and the asking price of those. Days on market over there on the right. And these were on the market an average of 30 days. So then I might go back to this other sheet and say, okay, so 46 days for the ones that have closed, 30 days for the ones that are under contract. Again, you told me that you wanted X to happen from a time frame standpoint. And the conversation is really simple. The dialogue is just, looks like we're going to be able to hit that, or maybe not. If you gave me a really short number and nobody had operated there, are you okay with that? Again, this whole way, we're just checking off on expectations. Then I also want to show you, hey, here's people that tried to sell their house and couldn't. There's been 3 houses that were put on the market, same basic features as yours, that didn't sell. Over here under days on market, here's how long they were on the market and whether they were expired or withdrawn. By the way, they were on the market for an average of 130 days. See, these people were on the market, but they weren't in the market. And there's a big difference. A lot of people are on the market, but very few are in. And in many cases, guys, what you can do is this is why this 2-step process is such a big deal. So I'm going to look at this and say, okay, wait a minute, 180 days on Sunrise, right? These guys were on the market for 180 days. If I roll the clock back 180 days, all of these houses got in and out of the market while this poor person was sitting there, right? They were on the market, they weren't in the market. And we do not want to create this scenario for our sellers because they will always get less money. All right, there's the asking price of the properties. And the other thing that we want to show is, 259, 269, 274.9. Hey, remember, the most anybody paid was 242. Now I ran this all the way to 300. So we got every possibility that we were in that top end, right? Again, a lot of this is framed with one of the opening questions on your initial phone call. Do you have a price in mind, right? Three possible answers. Yes, I do. I think it's worth X. I have no idea. I have an idea, but I'm not going to tell you. There's only three things, right? So at some point, now you're playing your hand out and you're inviting them to play their hand out as well. And from my contention, one more slide, then it's also, well, here's what we're competing against right now. Right now, there's 5 houses on the market. When we introduce your property onto the market, we'll be the 6th. Okay. Now, if you look over here at days on market, well, these guys are obviously something's wrong because they're still on the market 130 days. And again, you can go back to your sold page and say, and this one, and this one sold while this guy's still sitting here trying. Okay. The average days on market for what's sold is 46. So we could really say that this house right here on Main is out of the market, as is the one on Holland and Glen. So really, we only have a competition of 2 houses. And if you really want to fire up your ability to make a great presentation, you would look at the seller and say, and by the way, I was in both of those yesterday. So if you have any specific questions about how we stack up in relation to them, I'm ready. All right, again, original price and asking price. Sometimes you'll see price reduction, sometimes you won't, but make sure that you really analyze these numbers so that you're totally confident on where you're going to head in this presentation. We're going to show them the days on market, and we're going to show them the average days on market. So the average days on market is 68. We got 2 that are really strong competition. And we might say, hey, I was in the house on Smith Road yesterday. It's a really great house. That is our #1 competition as we introduce your property to the market. Be prepared for a really in-depth conversation. And then we sum everything up. The number of homes sold is 7. The average selling price is $236,200. The number of homes for sale is 5. The average asking price is $249,400. Expired or withdrawn is 3 at $268,100. Now, depending on how the answers to the previous questions have been, right, depends on whether I know I'm in harmony with the seller or whether I'm not. I'm not going to change my number. So I might say, based on these numbers, I would be comfortable. It looks like we would be able to operate somewhere in the 240s. Okay, using the law of the bracket, I would suggest a list price of $249,900. But maybe you can't. Maybe you know that the condition of this house is substandard compared to what these others were. Then maybe I'm going to suggest a price of $224,900. What I'm going to say to you guys is this: whatever you walked in with, go with that number. Okay, go with that number. I think we can operate very well at this number. Now, what do you do if a seller had told you earlier, well, I think my house is worth $275,000? I hate to break it to you, nobody's gotten $275,000. Nobody's gotten close to $275,000. And now we're going to start testing, even deeper for motivation. If the value is only in the, what do you do? Are you going to stay here? Oh, I'm going to find an agent that'll get me $275,000. In fact, I had a guy the other day said he thought he could get me $275,000. And I'm sure you did. Because see, agents will tell you they can get you whatever because it's a leverage point for their business. You asked me, or I asked you earlier, how honest you want me to be with you, and you said a 10. I'm being a 10 with you right now. I could lie to you. I could tell you that you could get $275,000. I could tell you get $300,000, and I'll get a sign in your yard. And by the simple fact that the agent gets a sign in your yard, they win. They now have something that they can market, maybe pick up some extra buyers off of. Maybe they can hold it open and pick up some buyers from that. Maybe those people have a house to sell. See, the reason that agents will tell you more is because it's to their advantage. The problem is you don't get your house sold. The problem is you're interrupting your life. You're having people come through your house on a regular basis. You're having to leave. You're having to take the dog. You're having to clean. And the marketplace, you're not going to trick the market. I'm being honest with you. We can list your house at X. And that's, to me, that's the pivotal point that you need to be willing to get to in these conversations with people. We haven't had to do this, guys, for the last 1.5 to 2 years. I want you to be prepared. Marketplace ripple that's taking. Okay, it's not like we're crashing. It's we're leveling off for a while. My analogy is that when you go on a roller coaster and you hear the clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack as you're going up to the first big peak, as soon as you crest, what do? You don't immediately go down. You level off. You wind around for a while. That, to me, my opinion, that's where we are right now in the market. But pricing becomes a much bigger issue. So do your research, define type of property, huge price range, defined area of town. Make sure you are ready to go through these numbers forwards, backwards, and sideways. Sit there as long as it takes. People ask me all the time, how long should a listing presentation take? As long as it needs to. With some people, I'm 3.5 hours. I've done a 3.5 hour presentation before. And we just kept going back through the process, back through the numbers. What would you do if this? What's plan B? Are you going to keep it and rent it? Right? What would you do? I'm not saying I'm right, but if this is the value, what are you going to do? I want to help you do whatever it is you need to do. And if they say, I would never sell my house for less than $275, then don't go through this. Don't go through the process. I mean, people will tell you they can get it. It's because they want a listing, right? I mean, one of the old brokers in Springfield was always like, just take the listing. An overpriced listing is better than no listing at all. Well, it's completely unfair to the consumer, in my opinion. All right, it's a waste of everybody's time, energy, and effort. All right, so I just want you to test out this pricing strategy, right? Perhaps as you start down this path, perhaps you do a CMA this way, and then whatever you're comfortable with, you keep going with that for now and see if we can't work some of this into your presentation. After you've done this, it's just like, they've been allowed to see that working with you have knowledge. And there's no need for a closing line. I've never been a fan of closing lines. My contention has always been, if you make a strong enough presentation, you don't have to close on people. It's a foregone conclusion. I'll work with you. So after our conversation, I'd welcome the opportunity to represent your sale of your property. Do you feel the same way? Is there any reason not to go ahead with it? Are you ready to move ahead? Anything we need to do before we get started? Do you want me to handle the sale for you? The truth is, and we're going to do marketing in the next session, no amount of marketing will fix a bad price. It's not about your marketing plan, guys. It's about a realistic expectation of what these properties are worth. And we've been on a wild ride, and we're having to kind of readjust on the fly here. And after you have an agreement, now's the time to present your marketing plan. And the marketing plan is really just a further explanation of how people go through the market, the strategies you're going to use based on how we know buyers work their way through the market, and most importantly, how you plan to communicate with them during the process. Because if you're going to nail one thing in this, it's communication protocol. What are the expectations of how often we're going to be communicating with each other? That will win you more listings than anything. Having a very tight communication protocol with your seller, which I'm going to lay out for you next week. All right. So once you have an agreement, we're going to use marketing and unique selling proposition, strategy, and communication. That's going to be in 2 weeks, right? That's the 23rd of February. And we'll do that. And then on March the 9th, we're doing an actual live role play. And I promise you, I'm going to use exactly this dialogue and give you guys a sense of what it really looks like. I've got 2 people lined up that are going to do it with me. I've already given them free rein to throw me every curveball that they can possibly think of, which is either going to lead to a really great role play, or it may be one of 3 things is going to happen, and I may not be able to help you, which was dialogue in the very beginning, and I may walk out. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Guys, work on your pricing strategies. I will tell you, I know that one of the most stressful times for an agent is a listing presentation. This is where your knowledge base really, where the rubber meets the road, if you will. I also know that there's nothing that will drive your business more than becoming a fabulous listing agent. Okay, with that, I'll see you on the 23rd, but we have, there's a bunch of chats going on, Maddie, and there's a bunch of Q&As, so I'm assuming we have questions. So
yes,
we will
do.
Now open the floor up. Okay.
We do. So one of our questions, one of our questions in here is, Is it recommended to show the client the agent's average list price to actual selling price?
Yes. As far as your own personal resume, I would do that in the pre-listing packet. Okay. In the pre-listing packet, do a page that shows your successes, your average market time, and things like that. Okay. So definitely, but the time to do that is the pre-listing packet. Okay. It's not in the listing presentation. It's in the pre-listing packet. It's a pre-sale book. Okay. That kind of shows you how I work, perhaps a list of testimonials in there as well. The properties that you've sold, the list price, the sales price, the date that they closed. Absolutely. But I would do it in the pre-list pack.
Perfect. Another person wants to know, how far do you usually go back for expireds or withdrawns?
Whatever time frame you used for your solds, I would use the same time frame for expireds and withdrawals.
Okay.
Exactly.
And another question here, is square footage not used in the tabular format, like price per square footage or house style for split level, 1 or 2 story?
No, because if you had a split level, I would say all the houses I'm about to show you are split levels like yours, right? Here's the thing with price with the square footage deal. I would defy any buyer, and probably made up stat, probably 90% of real estate agents, to walk through a house and at the end of it get within 100 square feet of how big it is. And as a result, it's illogical, because that 100 square feet could be a 10 by 10 fourth bedroom. It could also be another 2 feet all the way across the back of the house that people don't really notice. It feels a little bigger, but I don't know how much bigger it is. I'm just not a fan at all of price per square foot, and I would never even introduce that concept to a seller, because that's what they're going to dial in on. So I want to keep that information off the table. And I'm going to tell sellers, look, a lot of people probably have told you it's based on price per square foot. I don't believe with the pricing strategy, and here's why. Price per square foot stops, that valuation strategy stops at the front door. As soon as you walk in the house, price per square foot is no longer an issue. So I would not show it to them at all. Any other questions?
Those are all of the ones I think we have for the moment. Everyone's saying great information. But if you have any other questions, please feel free to submit them, or you're welcome to email us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you the contact info there. Yeah. If you have specific questions, just send me an email. We'll get back to you with it. You're going to get these the format of the CMA. I would welcome any questions that you have. You can hit me up on Facebook, send me a DM, that's my cell phone, send me a text message, whatever. Happy to try to help you through the process. Guys, I appreciate y'all very, very much. Thank you for your time today. And we'll see you in 2 weeks when we talk about the marketing plan and value propositions. Have a great week. Bye-bye.